Alrighty, YouTube, what's happening? If you're here, then you're obviously looking for the C# programming tutorials. If you're not, then, well, I guess you just enjoy watching my videos anyway. There are many things to do in programming, and this will be the first of many tutorials for the C# programming language. I will be doing other programming languages, such as C++ and Java, but for now, let's just start off with the basics of the C# language, since it's fairly easy to learn. So, really, what does a program do? Well, it follows a set of instructions, which is the lines of code that the user writes themselves. So it could be sequentially, selectively, or iteratively, or all three, depending on what type of project you're working on at the time. So what you want to do is download a compiler, which probably, if you're using a Windows computer, you would have C# Express. Let's just type into Google. First thing you see, Microsoft.com, and it will come up with this. And then you just install in English. But if you have the money, you can, instead of the Express edition, you can just go ahead and download the Visual Studio, just the actual thing itself. Visual Studio, which contains everything. So you can code in C#, in C++, whatever. The Express edition literally gives you the language that you want to program in. I'm just taking a sip of my coffee there. So, once you've downloaded it, I'm using Visual Studio, but it'll be exactly the same thing. When you open it for the first time, just click the New Project button here. And we're going to want to first off start in a console-based application, because it's a lot easier to get the hang of all the technical side of programming, rather than the visual, which is the forms application. You don't want that just yet. So type in "Hello World." We're going to be doing this application. You may have heard of this this famous project right here. So just click OK, and it should load a few lines of code, which is all of this. It gives you this automatically to sort of start you off, but since you've never programmed before, well, you might have, but I'm doing it for people who haven't, you have no idea what any of this is. So to learn it, we're just going to get rid of it and do it ourselves. So start off with using system. System is essentially a folder which contains loads of subfolders and loads of classes to do with programming, and well, essentially what you're going to be using to actually write your code. If you don't have the system folder, you can't code, unless you want to make all the classes yourself, which is kind of pointless if you have the system folder. Anyway, so you have that. That's all you're going to need for this. That's all you're going to be able to use for this tutorial. Next, you're going to be wanting class, and then hello world. Well, it could be anything, but just hello world is, because we're making this would be the name of the project, so it's got sort of this. Just that's what you have to do. We'll get more into classes later on. See how the color changes from the system here, so it's standard black font to this sort of bluey green color. We'll get more into detail on that later. But for now, just know that you have to have a class and using system for a program to work. And notice how I have semicolon after system. You don't do that after class, because class is where you're going to be writing your methods and your code, and you want to close the class at the end. Semicolon closes it after the line, and you don't want to close a class right after you've made it, because that clearly doesn't work. Instead you have a brace, and each brace has to have a matching closed brace. Pretty standard. If you do maths, you should know. And it's the same with pretty much everything in programming. You're going to need an open and closed brace, or open and closed parameters, or square brackets if you're making an array, that sort of thing. Just know that if you have an open one, you need a closed one. So now that you've made your class, you're going to need a method. We normally would have maybe like a namespace, which is just so you can put all your code in one namespace, but you don't really need that for this application. It's just, we'll cover that later on, don't worry about that. So method is where you actually be writing your code. The class contains the methods, and the methods contain the code. So, if we do public static void main, every method, or every code, the entire project has to start with a main method. Doesn't matter where this main method goes, as long as there is at least one main method in the entire project, it'll work. If you don't have a main method, which is the capital M, it won't work because the compiler doesn't know where to start. And also these words, public static void, we'll probably cover these in a later tutorial where they're actually more relevant. But for now, just know that if you don't have these three words and a main, then it's not going to work. So bear in mind that. So the hello world application. Simple input output application. Well, in this case it's really just going to be output. We're going to be using the keyword, well, the class console. Again, we'll get into classes later, but for now, console. If you do dot, its method is writeLine. See this here? Basically, writeLine tells the compiler to write something, well, tells the computer really to write something to the screen, which would be our hello world. You need parameters because you need to actually show something, and inside is where the data goes. And inside quotation marks, see, you can have a space. I should have mentioned this earlier. You can have a space right here. Doesn't really matter that much inside these, but if it hasn't got quotation marks, you need to be very specific in what it is. Okay, so that needs a semicolon. Console.writeLine hello world. That's essentially it, kind of. If we went to do this now, it would simply do the program like that and close. The program works, but it closes too fast for you to actually know what's going on. So you're going to need another line of code, which is readLine. ReadLine is the same as WriteLine, except that it waits for the user input rather than writing to the screen. So readLine is like reading keyboard input, which normally is enter. Well, it basically is enter unless you tell it otherwise. So now if we try this now, hello world, and as you see we've got a readLine, so it's waiting for user input. If we press enter, it will close. That's essentially it for a hello world application. You have your standard output and no input, since we don't have any variables. We can probably cover variables in the next tutorial, chapter 2. But aside from that, that's your first application. If you want to remember, you basically have to remember the structure, really, the hierarchy. I like to think of it as like a Word document. So you have your using system, which is basically turning on your computer, turning the system on to get access to all the keywords, such as console. And then you're going to open your Word document and give it a title, so class hello world. And then this is the main body of your text, your methods, and then your actual text, which is the code. So it's basically turning on the computer, opening the Word document, writing your code. And it's as simple as that, really. It's just a matter of learning. That's basically it for the first installment. If you have any questions, just leave a comment, maybe subscribe, personal message me. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will be making more, so look out for them. Thank you for listening.